Okay, can you guys see that well?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, great. And I don't know how much of you know about this topic, but we usually try to since we're not in person, we can't do a survey, but some of you might know a lot, some of you might not, so feel free to ask questions at the end, or so no worries if this is kind of brand new. So yeah, our goals with doing this assisted suicide training is to understand, first of all, what it is and why it's dangerous, and to dialogue effectively. So in the same way that we argue the abortion argument, we want to make sure we know what we're talking about first, which is why we delve into the actual definition, and then explaining why it's actually wrong and not actually compassionate. So we do that. And obviously we want to talk to people about how it's dangerous because healthcare workers are supposed to save our lives, not destroy them. So in the same way that abortion is wrong, in the case of assisted suicide, the doctor's actually helping you to end your life and giving you a means for that. And it's very dangerous when the people we count on to heal us are actually having the right to kill us. And even though it's not legal everywhere, because it has become legal, I think it's become legal in, I think, 5 states. So Washington, Oregon, Colorado, California, and Vermont, actually, and Montana, which I'm surprised about. But so we should be caring because it's not something that is against the law. It used to be obviously considered very inhumane, but now more and more states are passing it as something that's legal for the sake of alleviating suffering. So we need to be working to make this illegal in the same way that we work to make abortion illegal, because the pro-life movement does strive to defend life at all stages, so not only in the womb but all the way up until natural death, and life is precious in all circumstances, regardless of whether it's a very difficult life. So we're trying to push that willfully helping someone to end their life in an unnatural way is actually unconstitutional and immoral. It used to not be on our radar as much because it wasn't legal, but now it is. So, and a lot of people actually use the argument, since assisted suicide is legal, why would it be, why should we need to defend the preborn children if we don't need to defend people who are already alive, or who are already born? And so it's really hard in the pro-life argument, to even argue that we should be defending the preborn, especially when our country is failing to defend people who have already been born. So that's another reason why we work hard to defend against assisted suicide. So first we have to get to the definition. So like this says, assisted suicide, we want to have a conversation about this. So we want to know what we're talking about. It's when a physician or doctor knowingly and intentionally provides a person with the knowledge and means required to commit suicide. So including counseling about, lethal doses of drugs, prescribing lethal doses, and supplying those drugs in the same way that an abortionist will supply the abortion pill, or the doctor will be educated and understanding of how to perform an abortion. With assisted suicide, the doctor is actually willfully giving you a way to end your life. So not only is that very dangerous because they're going against, it seems very obvious that it would be going against HIPAA, because that's them saying we promise to do everything to protect life. But also someone might not even know how to end their life, and then the doctor might say, if you want to alleviate your suffering, we have ways for you to end that life. And that just seems preposterous, but we do need to understand that we are living in a world where people are actually telling you, if you want out, here's a way for you to do that. And so that is a very dangerous thing, and that's what we're up against. The knowledge that doctors have of how to end life is being just given out normally, like, this is okay, if you want to end your life, go ahead. So here is a video, actually. It's optional, but I think we should show it. It talks about what assisted suicide is, how sometimes the prognosis can be wrong, and they're still, in the same way how doctors with abortion, they might tell a woman, your baby might be born with abnormalities, you might want to, if you think you should, if you don't want a baby with disabilities, go ahead and abort it. A lot of the times, a doctor will make a diagnosis and the baby will be born perfectly fine. In the same way, so a doctor might say, okay, this is a terminal illness or something that's going to leave you in pain forever. So if you want to, end your life now, go for it. And sometimes their prognosis can be wrong. And it's also showing you why a patient would ever even request assisted suicide. So that's what this video is.
I'm a physician with a subspecialty in kidney disease who find myself now taking care of extremely ill patients. Went to Georgetown Medical School, subspecializing in kidney disease and an exciting new field of dialysis. And the idea was to find a methodology which would allow a patient to go on the artificial kidney machine 3-4 hours, cleanse the blood, etc. At the time before the fistula was invented, there were panels. They were called death panels, believe it or not. This was a coarse name, but it was death panels. We met once a month, and patients gave their bios because there was just a restricted amount of money available for dialysis. I said, I can't do this anymore. I can't choose this patient over this patient and determine the value of their lives. And I withdrew from this panel. Hundreds of thousands of transplanted kidneys have been in place because of that invention. Prognostication is so difficult and so wrong. Every time they ask you to prognosticate on life expectancy or how long, it's usually wrong. Beyond any doubt, many patients are living longer than the estimated prognosis if we go strictly on statistics. Tremendous changes about to be made or are made, and it's too late. I mean, these people have forfeited their lives. There are many, many patients like this where the pathology is incorrect. It's a mistaken diagnosis, and the patient doesn't have the disease. Depression is not just a word where people is quiet and laying there. It's painful. It is not a happy person that's going to say, I really like you to kill me. I mean, this is not, or I want to kill myself. This is not the case. I want to make the point that suicide is not medical treatment. To love someone, you must be present, you must touch, you must hold, and you must speak. I would say, let me love you enough that I don't have to ever be part of someone that takes your life away. Let me love you enough. I promise you, I'll not desert you. I'll be with you. I'll carry you. I'll hold you. Don't leave me that way.
Can you guys see my PowerPoint still?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. So now that we've watched that video, that's kind of explaining, and so we're going to go into the history of assisted suicide. So actually, courts ruled it unconstitutional, and there were two court cases in 1997 where it was ruled that it was never allowed. And almost all the major medical associations agreed that assisted suicide was wrong. The American Medical Association said that allowing physicians to participate in assisted suicide would obviously cause more harm than good, and it's incompatible with a physician's role to protect life, and it would also be impossible or difficult to control. because basically anybody who was willing to say that they wanted it would be required to receive it, and so they actually declared it unconstitutional. But there are common arguments, obviously, which people have used, which have caused it to become legalized. So they say, then we just allow people to suffer for their whole life if they have this terminal illness. We need to let people die with dignity. So if they're really struggling and they don't want to keep going, it should be their decision whether they live or die. And just like my body, my choice, a lot of people say it's my life, so it's my choice. Which honestly, like, this obviously poses a problem, because anybody who is wanting to, even like jump off a bridge, they could use the same argument. Obviously that kind of suicide is wrong. And it's strange that we've just convinced ourselves, oh, that if we have a pill and someone who's medical is telling us that we can do this, that's something different. In the end, we should be trying to help people defend their lives at all costs, even in difficult situations. So just like you would tell someone who's mentally ill, don't do this, it's not what you really want, we should also be doing that same thing for the person who's really struggling and suffering. Because and it is hard to debate, especially with someone who isn't a religious person, because we see, if you're religious and you believe in, heaven, and you believe in God, you're going to think, obviously, there's more to life than just having it, than not suffering. Suffering has a purpose, and that can be difficult, but we do need to try to compassionately explain to people that ending their life isn't actually what's going to make them happy. So that's really important to think about when you're arguing with these people who have these common arguments. It's very similar with when you're in the same way when we talked about the abortion apologetics, you want to make sure that you're very compassionate and that you listen to them first, and clarify the objections that they have. So like, you want to ask open-ended questions. How did you come, to have that opinion that it's okay to end your life if you're struggling? What do you mean by that kind of thing? So just make sure that people know that you're wanting to see their side and that you're not just there to win the argument. So yeah, always make sure to do that first. And people often say it's really hard to know that someone in my life is suffering. So why is it wrong to want them to be out of that suffering? If someone's going to be disabled their whole life, shouldn't it be their decision if they want to? And I don't know if you guys have seen the movie Me Before You, but that was a movie that was done recently, and it's about someone who was paralyzed from the neck down in an accident. And his mother was trying to make him see, you have so much to live for, even if your life is different. And in the end, he does choose to go through with it. This girl is trying to make him see that she can make his life worth living and that he has so much to live for. But in the end, he does actually choose to commit suicide against her will and against his mother's will. And they very much glorified it. Like, it was, it's what's going to make him happy. And it's sad that the world is pushing that. And honestly, in a lot of ways, it's kind of just, I think, a slap in the face to the people who have great disabilities and overcome those things and really are able to inspire people. Because if we're pushing, oh, your life isn't as good as someone else's, so you should be able to end it, that's not true. Like, even the hardest of lives can make such a difference and be more inspiring than anything. Just like Jessica Long, who's, she was born without legs and now she's an Olympic swimmer. That's what we need to be showing people. Like, yes, life's going to be difficult, but that doesn't mean it's not worth living. And it's sad that the world is telling people suffering means you can take your life, or you're paralyzed, your life can't be as full as someone else's, so go ahead and end that life if you want to. So that's what we need to talk about, that yes, it's unfortunate that people could be in excruciating pain. I agree with you about this hard situation, and that the person facing the diagnosis really does need to feel loved. But I think that a tough diagnosis is not a justification to end someone's life. It isn't our job in a caring and just society. It's our job to care for the weakest of people and to uplift them, but not to tell them, this is hard. If you want an out, that's fine. So after listening to their questions and asking them and trying to acknowledge the hardship, we do need to present an argument. So that's where we go to next. After we listen to them, we want to really explain answers to these objections. So people will say things like, do you want people to suffer? Of course not, but we have things like modern medicine that will alleviate your suffering and will make it as easy for you to live as comfortably as possible, but still to live. You know, this question will come up a lot, and I actually have a friend who is a nurse. She grew up Catholic, and very pro-life, and over time in being a nurse, she ended up working in hospice, and eventually seeing people suffer. She has this whole opinion now that suffering is evil and should be stopped at all costs. So she has actually participated in assisted suicides and been the one administering that drug. And it's so sad to me that she doesn't understand, like, that it's a human life, and that there is beauty in suffering, and that people can, you know, get through these things. All the things that she learned, you know, growing up, she's kind of just thrown that out because it's so hard for her to see people suffer. And I understand where people are coming from, that suffering is hard to watch, but someone's life is so precious. We can't just say throw it out because it might be difficult for them. And unfortunately, doctors are really encouraging it, you know. And that's the scary thing. Doctors and nurses, you know, she was the one saying, if you want out. He was like a 28-year-old man, and he was just he had a terminal illness and was struggling, and he wasn't going to improve. And she, you know, the whole family was open and allowed him to do this. And it just breaks my heart, because it's someone's life, you know. So, but yeah, the whole idea of we need to alleviate suffering as much as we can, it will come up a lot when you're arguing this. But adequate interventions do exist to control pain, so we need to be pointing that out. Like, there's a lot of ways to make it as painless as possible, and we need to be helping people with that, and having workers who are there to make things happier and nicer for people, but not to tell them that they should end their life, you know. So that's a very big argument. We can't always end the pain, but their job is to end the pain, but not the life. You can't say, well, there's nothing we can do about the pain, so let's just get rid of it by killing you. You know, that's never going to be okay. So that's the first argument. Looks like there's a video coming up, but let's see. Oh yeah, so this is a story about a girl named Jeanette. She was a woman from Oregon who had terminal cancer, and she requested assisted suicide drugs because she didn't want to suffer. But actually, I guess she didn't take it. So this is showing you that she actually came out at the and decided not to. And this is her story. So she's gonna tell that. Just a second.
I couldn't believe death was at my door. And I thought, surely that can't be right. Death? He's saying 6 months to a year to live? It was life and death. I just knew I didn't want to suffer. One day I was bleeding so bad that they had to take me by ambulance to the hospital. The doctor came in and said, Jeanette, you have colon cancer. And it didn't hit me. I just went, I have to go. I have to take care of my mother. I have to do my work. I have to go. And they said, you don't understand. You have cancer.
When I first met Miss Hall, she had been evaluated by her surgeon. Her surgeon had determined that the cancer was inoperable, meaning that it could not be cured with surgery. So he referred her to me for radiation and also chemotherapy. She immediately told me, she said, I'm not here for the treatment, Dr. Stevens, I'm here for the pills. 2 years ago, I voted for Oregon's assisted suicide law, and that's what I want. I'm here for the pills. I don't want radiation, I don't want chemotherapy.
I reached that point without hope. I was sinking into depression.
I said, Miss Hall, would you come back and see me next week? Let's talk about this some more. I was able to get better acquainted with her, and I learned that she had a son who was attending the police academy. He was in his late 20s. And I said, Miss Hall, wouldn't you like to see him graduate? He was single. I said, wouldn't you like to see him get married? Does he know what you're considering here?
It made me realize there was hope. There was something to live for. And I thank him for that one sentence that brought me back to reality and made me try.
So she did accept the treatment. She received chemotherapy and radiation. She lost her hair temporarily, but the tumor just melted away.
Dr. Stevens, if you had believed in physician-assisted suicide, I wouldn't be here. You didn't give up on me, you didn't abandon me, and that's why I'm still here. These are the kind of doctors we need that give you hope when your hope is gone. Here I am 15 years later, and I went to my son's graduation. It's great to be alive.
Wow, that was beautiful. So that's an amazing example of a doctor who looked at the HIPAA oath and said, I took an oath to, to protect life. He's taking it very seriously. It's amazing. It's sad that, I wish every doctor was like him, but that's amazing that he was able to have that courage and to convince her, because she did have so much to live for. So, but this next argument we have is, a lot of people say, I want to die with dignity. And a lot of these people who are thinking that, they think that when you are sick or something and you lose control of your bodily or mental functions, that's an undignified way of living. And while taking a pill to pass away is a dignified way to die. I'd rather do that than see myself, lose my memory or lose my ability to do things on my own. They say that's a dignified way, but actually the statement is really insulting. Like I was saying, it's insulting to people who choose to endure those things and endure those consequences of dying naturally. You're basically saying, like, wow, I had the sense to keep someone from having to take care of me the way that person didn't, and that is really just insulting to the people who struggle. I'm a caregiver, a certified caregiver, and I've had to take care of people who, were struggling or were suffering from things like Lou Gehrig's, and they were young, but they couldn't do anything for themselves, but it was a great honor to help them. I took that as such a privilege of my life to be able to be the one helping them get through that. And you learn so much from those people, and all that they suffer. There's such an inspiration and such a model of how to suffer with dignity. And so I'm so grateful for those people, and I wish that we could be showing people that there's nothing wrong in being human. And unfortunately, because of our humanity, we're not perfect and things happen that go wrong, but that doesn't make us any less worthy of being taken care of. So and so, yeah, and a lot of people talk about dignity in dying comes from the fact that a person is able to choose the way they die, which it's a silly thought. It's like, well, everyone dies, but no one is really going to be able to choose. No one wants to die, so it's not a natural thing. People will say, at least I'll know that I have the control over my life. A lot of people worry about being in control. We just want to be in control, but we're not. We can't keep ourselves from dying no matter how hard we try, and in the same way we shouldn't want to control when we die. And a lot of people who, it relates to how people confront death. A lot of people will say, at least I'll be ready for it. This is a story that history recounts situations of individuals who are forced to endure degrading deaths, but face those deaths in a dignified way. So there are people who, died in concentration camps, died by the hands of the Nazis. There was a girl named Sophie. She knew if she was caught, she would be executed. She was handing out anti-war pamphlets, and she and her brother were caught, and they were executed on the guillotine a few days later. And that's obviously very degrading and humiliating, but she faced her death with dignity, and she's remembered now as a great hero. And so it's important to talk to people about being able to willingly accept death, even if it's not the way you want it. It's just another way of, living a heroic life. And dying with dignity also includes receiving compassionate care, like food and water, and getting through the stages of dying with dignity, people being there to help you. And directly ending your own life has nothing to do with dignity at all at the moment of death. It just means that you're not willing to have people take care of you the way society ought. It's good for the people who need to take care of them. It's good for their souls and for the person who's being taken care of. That's such a beautiful way of us showing that we're here for one another, and just saying, let's just scrap all that and just get it over with. That's not dignified at all. So really be showing people that having control is not dignity. Dignity is really just showing how much you care about people and are willing to suffer with them and help them through the things that, you know, in their life they can't control. And also it's important to talk about the fact that the drugs that cause assisted suicide, they don't actually ensure a peaceful death, because there can be a lot of complications. Actually, there's little known facts that the drugs that are used to commit suicide, they do have scary side effects. Barbiturates is the most common substance or drug that's used in assisted suicide, and it's in Washington and Oregon, and it does not assure a peaceful death. They're also used to kill criminals who have received the death penalty, and death by these drugs is very cruel. I mean, it's obviously hard to watch even for a criminal. So when you watch it in someone who's just, you know, choosing that, I wish we could be wanting so much to not let someone go through that, this pill that's going to unnaturally stop their heart and stop their life. And what these pills do, if you overdose, they're known to cause distress, and so they can cause you to have muscle spasms and gasp, and lose consciousness. A person can vomit multiple times and be very panicked and fearful. And it will be like, I mean, it's something that's obviously not natural, so your body's obviously going to kind of panic from it, and many days can elapse before the death actually occurs. So even though you're thinking that you're in control, you could still just have a very painful death from putting this substance in your body that's so unnatural. So talking to people about those side effects and the fact that actually that's not going to be dignified at all, and also it's going to be kind of just as scary as suffering in a natural way, or even more so, because it's so true that at least when we're going through something that's naturally part of death, it's not nearly as scary or intense as doing something in your body that's very much not supposed to be there. So yeah, and it's very clear when you talk about, you know, the vomiting and how long it takes, that's clearly not a dignified way to die. So just really be pointing that out. I think I've gone too far. And then the my life, my choice argument. We don't have an unlimited right to kill ourselves, which is why people can't naturally commit suicide. You know, I don't know why we've decided that my life, my choice, but as long as the doctor permits. It is actually a crime to commit suicide. And so I guess in the certain states where it's legal to do assisted suicide, you still have to go and get a doctor's prescription and have them diagnose you. But this is just another example. Like, we shouldn't have the right to take our own life in the same way that we don't have a right to take someone else's life, because your life does have worth. Yeah, we don't have the right to take that away. And it's funny that the argument is my life, my choice, in the same way that it's my body, my choice. It's just kind of this circular argument. They're going to do whatever they can to make it sound good. But really, of course, we would never say, yeah, you want to commit suicide, great, go ahead. Like, obviously it's a tragedy every time we hear that someone did commit suicide. So why is it just like, okay, as if the doctor says so, you know? And I don't have any personal stories about assisted suicide because I haven't had to deal with that, obviously. But there are, I'm going to put in the chat at the end, if you want to watch the video, there's a YouTube video on someone's stories about it. If we have the unlimited right to kill ourselves, then no one would stop people from jumping off bridges, but obviously we do. and there would be no police prevention. But obviously, police do intervene because we do think that that life is precious. And sadly, I think the world is just teaching you that if it's a medical professional, then it's fine. In the same way that they teach you that if abortion is legal and a medical professional is doing it, then it's fine. But these procedures are always dangerous and they're not okay. And it shouldn't be a matter of right as soon as a doctor says so. But that's what the world is pushing. So we have to be very careful with that when people talk about, okay, it's not okay for us to put our lives in our own hands, but if a doctor says so, that's fine. And who's giving them, like, it's crazy that just the medical, the education they have is giving them the power to put people's lives in their hands. We can't let people have that power because they will abuse it. Abortionists make a lot of money off of performing abortions, so of course they're going to push that in the same way. The doctors who are willing to do these things are probably making money off of it, so it's not good to put them in power of this. And then it's important to talk about this topic too, because a lot of people will say, like I said in the beginning, if assisted suicide is legal, then why would abortion be wrong? Because it's just taking life in another way, someone choosing to take someone's life. And RCs get that question on campuses. Why are you defending abortion or defending the pro-life argument and saying a baby in the womb deserves life when the world is saying that even people who have already been born, it can be up to medical professionals to end their lives too. So how do we respond to this? So you need to establish that the preborn have human rights just like anyone. And then you can say that you disagree with assisted suicide. You can go along with that person's assumption that it's okay, responding to the argument on why abortion is still wrong, even if assisted suicide. Even if people are saying assisted suicide isn't wrong, that doesn't make abortion not wrong. And that's the argument people say, like, if a child's going to be born into a difficult situation, I'm going to be putting the child out of its misery. And we would obviously need the consent of the preborn child, because in assisted suicide, you definitely need the consent of the person who's taking that pill. In the same way, if you're going to say that abortion and assisted suicide are the same, then you need the consent of the little baby in the womb to kill it. And that's a good way to argue that if people say, well, assisted suicide is legal, so abortion should be. But the baby in the womb is not giving consent, and so that's why they are different. Obviously, it's important to think too that assisted suicide distorts the relationship between the doctor and the patient. The doctor is supposed to be protecting life, but all of a sudden he switches gears in assisted suicide, and instead of trying to use every means to save you, he is just giving you a way of saying, if you want out, go ahead. And it really does confuse the role of the doctor in being the person who's supposed to be helping you at all costs. Suddenly he becomes this person who, with the flip of a switch and a signature, can administer something to end your life. So it's really important to see kind of the distortion there. Rather than having confidence in your doctor to treat you, now he looks like someone who, at the drop of a hat, would suddenly say, okay, if you don't want me to help you, then I won't. Psychiatrists too are medical professionals that treat people who have suicidal thoughts, and they should always be trying to prevent their patients from feeling those suicidal things. If we're suddenly saying that a doctor can decide to not help you through your wanting to commit suicide, then who's to say that if someone went to counseling because they were struggling with suicidal thoughts, what if that psychiatrist has said, well, actually, assisted suicide's okay now, so if you want to just, commit suicide, then go for it. That's obviously would be the person in counseling, or who is counseling them, would definitely, lose their rights as a counselor in helping these people. If you can't counsel someone to, have assisted suicide, then doctors shouldn't be able to administer it either. So that's important to think about too. That just as you wouldn't counsel the person who's struggling with suicidal thoughts and is having mental incapacities, you shouldn't also say if you're suffering or you're disabled, that you should be able to destroy your life. We should be encouraging everyone to see that their life has value no matter what. And in places like Oregon, medical systems have already been offering people assisted suicide instead of chemotherapy, which is crazy to think about, but it's just like an automatic now. Well, it's legal here, so if you don't want to go through the struggle of trying to get rid of your cancer, we can just end that now. And I just can't imagine telling someone that, like saying, just like that woman that we just saw, thank God the doctor told her to go through it. Yes, it was scary, but if she hadn't gone through it, she wouldn't have been here for 15 more years and seen all these things happen. That's what we need to be pushing. And to kind of just, like, I didn't even know that was a thing until just now, but like to be saying, you know, you need this treatment. A lot of people find that scary. If someone was just not even going to encourage you and try to say, we're going to support you through this, and right off the bat was saying, if you want to just not try, then go for it. Think about people in like desperate situations. If someone was kind of encouraging them to just not even try, then of course they wouldn't, you know? So we need to be showing people that we're going to be there for them through all the tough struggles, not to say, you know, it's going to be tough for me to walk you through this, so if you want an out, go for it. You know, that's terrible. So we have a shorter video.
They would pay to kill me, but they will not give me the medication to try to stop the growth of my cancer.
So that's an example. I wonder if they're trying to push assisted suicide because it's easier for the doctors. They won't have to, you know, take the time to help you through something, for them to just say, take the pill so I don't have to, you know, help, give you the treatments that will help elongate your life. It just seems like an easy way out for doctors who don't want to take the time. That's what that video makes me think of. And it really does make it seem like if you're a burden on others, your life isn't worth living. And that's obviously just such a lie, in the same way that it's a lie that they're feeding about the abortion industry. The legality of suicide, it's really going to really impact the most poor and vulnerable, because it kind of just gives, it kind of makes it easy for people to encourage you to die if you going through something really hard is going to be, you know, financially a struggle. Some people might want out on taking care of you, and they'll make it seem like it's for your benefit to end your life, but obviously that's not true. It's the same kind of argument when people want to tell women it will be easier for you if you just abort the baby. It seems the same kind of thing. It'll be easier for you if you just go through with the suicide instead of going through the struggle of what treatment is going to take. And that does create this very slippery slope, because once we legalize suicide, challenges will arise that suddenly there won't be restrictions on, and will eventually allow assisted suicide in all circumstances. In the Netherlands, assisted suicide was legalized as far back as in 2000, and now involuntary euthanasia is legal there. Which means that a doctor is able to kill patients without the consent of the patient if they think, oh, this person's life it's never going to improve. The doctor can actually take matters into his own hands and kill you without consent. So how would people be able to have confidence in their doctors? And that is the slippery slope. Just like in the Netherlands, it seems like pretty soon, if we just keep allowing people to choose that they can end their life if it's going to be tough, then all of a sudden doctors are going to say, this is going to be really treatment that in the end doesn't cure you. So if it's really too hard for us to do that, they can take matters into their own hands. And there have been involuntary suicides. This is saying, I'll just read this story. It says, in June of 2017 in London, England, a 10-month-old baby named Charlie was diagnosed with a rare genetic disorder, and he was hospitalized. and the doctors determined that the best thing for him was death with dignity. The parents disagreed, and so the doctors searched for another doctor that would treat the baby. And the parents, they found a doctor in the U.S. who agreed to treat this little boy. And they set up a GoFundMe to finance it. They raised all the money, and he went in an ambulance, but the doctors at the high court said the baby couldn't leave the hospital and told the parents that they were going to take him off life support. So they kept fighting for their little boy's right to live, and they took it to the media in Europe, but the judge ruled that the little boy should die because his life, he's on life support, there's nothing we can do. And there was literally nothing they could do because the judge deemed it that way. Their hospital refused the parents' last wish, and they literally stopped treating him, so they had to take this little boy home. And they promised him every single day they would do everything they could. And then when they took him home, they were even denied that. They weren't even able to support him. So they knew when they brought him home that he was eventually going to die. And they didn't even have a say in that. So basically, with all of this legality, eventually it's not even up to the parents whether they can fight for the child's life, because the medical professionals will just decide to stop treatment. And where's the dignity and the choice in that? It just seems like in the end, it's just these physicians and people who have all the knowledge deciding, we don't want to treat this person, so we're going to tell you that it's not the right thing, and eventually we're just going to force you to not treat them. And if that's just like the opposite of choice, I don't know. It isn't the opposite of choice. I don't know what is. And now in Oregon, a law has been passed that makes it legal to starve and dehydrate patients with dementia and patients who are mentally ill. So it does seem like we are just going down the slippery slope, because we're willfully allowing to withhold treatment for people that have these terminal illnesses, and we're just basically saying that if a life isn't completely able to be lived independently and without the treatment of extreme means, then it's not worth living at all. But there are pro-life alternatives to assisted suicide, obviously, and so it's true that we can choose to not go through life-saving extreme measures, so we don't have to elongate our lives by doing every means necessary to, halt death, but that doesn't mean we can choose to administer the pill that will end our lives. Kind of refusing extreme measures is not the same as committing suicide, and it's important to see that. If we decide, don't revive me because it will just, I'll be on life support forever. It's not wrong to make that decision. We do have the ability to decide whether or not we want to be put on life support, but deciding to not be put on life support is not the same as taking an assisted suicide pill. And it's still a pro-life alternative. So we're not like forcing you to suffer as long as possible. If you want to just die naturally, that's fine. And it's important to talk about that if you don't want extreme measures, that's completely up to you. And that is dying in a way that's your choice and with dignity. But that's very different from, we're going to give you a pill that's going to stop your heart and cause you to spasm until you vomit and then die. Obviously there's a difference there. There's a book called Power Over Pain, How to Get the Pain Control You Need. So there are a lot of ways that we can make things as painless as possible, and also as natural as possible, and give you the comfort that you need, and as much as we can. And that is the job of someone in healthcare, to help you and to help you not suffer, but not to say if you have suffering, then you might as well just go ahead and stop trying now. If our lives were determined on how painless they were or how suffering-free they were, then none of us would have life at all, because life is just, it is a struggle, and we do suffer, but there's also beautiful things that come from that. And to teach people that once you're suffering, there's no point anymore, that's basically discrediting every life that ever was. and who suffered more than anybody, Jesus on the cross, and his life was the greatest of lives, and changed so many lives. So it's important to see that actually to be able to suffer for another person or go through something that's really a struggle is actually a beautiful way to offer up your life, and to be a blessing and a example to people. So this whole idea that suffering is just the worst thing that could ever happen is just so anti-Christian and against what Jesus came to show us. And that it's a challenge for people who aren't religious. But if you are having a discussion with someone who believes in God and believes in the Bible, but also is saying assisted suicide is fine, you should bring that in. That us being able to offer up our sufferings is one of the greatest gifts we have for combating evil in our world. Every little pain you go through, if you offer it up, think about how much God can use that for good. So it's important to talk about that with someone who is religious. And if obviously you're talking to someone who doesn't even believe that Jesus's life mattered, you're going to have to take a different approach. But it is important to bring that in if you can. And so it's important to also point out that doctors are healers, and they're supposed to, try to alleviate suffering, but to say that they're also can end the life of someone if they think that's how it should be, that's obviously wrong. And we need better medical practices that allow people to feel like they're still in control of their bodies. So we're working all the time to improve those things. But there are times when there's really nothing we can do about, like someone with Lou Gehrig's, they really lose all control of function of their body, but that doesn't mean that their life is pointless and shouldn't be lived. They have beautiful things to offer the world, and us being able to serve those people is also a great blessing. So we need to see that everything happens for a reason, and even though they're hard, we can grow from these things, the person suffering and the person helping the person who suffers. There's beauty and growth in all of that. And to just say, let's end it because that's easier, is just kind of denying the truth that overcoming adversity is like the greatest thing we can do as humans. We only really see life with living, like we're always most proud about the things that we get through that are really hard. If things were always easy and we were always just accomplishing the easy stuff, life would get really boring. It's when you're able to attack that really difficult situation and learn from it and grow that life becomes actually joyful. So it's really important to point out to people that there's no joy in a life that's only lived if there isn't any suffering. We have one more video.
With depression, what it does is it tricks you into thinking that suicide is the only way out. I felt alone, unloved, unwanted, and unneeded. I thought that I could just go away and everyone would be glad because then I wouldn't be a burden anymore.
This kind of thinking is very typical of what we see with patients that want to end their own life, including patients that have a diagnosis of a terminal illness. They tend to go through periods where it's hard to see their way through, where it's hard to feel like they can endure another day.
After 4 years of clinical depression, no idea what was going on, what was happening, I finally decided that the only way out of this pain, of this suffering, was by my own death. That was the only option. I deliberately crashed the car 60 miles per hour wearing no seatbelt.
The #1 suicide spot in the world is the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. A journalist tracked down the few people who have survived the jump from the Golden Gate Bridge. There's only a small handful of them. And he asked them a very interesting question. He said, what was going through your mind in the 4 seconds between when you jumped and when you hit the water? Every single one of them said the same thing in response. They said that they regretted the decision to jump, with one man saying, I realized in an instant that all the problems in my life that I thought were unsolvable were actually solvable, except for having just jumped.
I was dazed, I was in shock. I couldn't believe that I was still alive. When someone is standing on the ledge, on the edge, ready to jump, what's the natural human response? is to pull them back. With assisted suicide, the message is go ahead, jump.
What doctor-assisted suicide does is that we give them easy access to means. It's giving them a nudge. It's nudging the person off the bridge. And what they need in that moment is social support, medical support, solidarity, loving care, and kindness. When they get through that crisis, they look back and say, I'm glad that I didn't attempt to act out in that moment.
Someone's suicide impacts so many, their family, their friends. The ripples just spread and spread and spread in ways that someone who's depressed could never imagine.
By saying no to doctor-assisted suicide, we can say yes to a dignified death, where patients' pain control, their anxiety, the complications of their illness are given the best care that medicine has available.
Every suicide is tragic. Whether you're old or young, healthy or sick, your life is precious where you are and is worth living.
That's a great example of showing that people just want someone to support them. I think about the abortion argument when women say, if I just had one person who had told me not to go in, I wouldn't have done it. And we need to be, and you know, when someone's on the ledge, I think really what they want is for someone to say, don't jump. I'm here for you. Let's talk about it, you know? And what he said is completely true, that when someone gives you the pill, it's like being there on the ledge with someone and saying, go ahead, go for it, jump off the bridge. That is an unheard of thing to think about. Like, of course, no one would ever say that, and to say that to someone when they're really just struggling with their life and not knowing what to do, you know, the instinct should be to embrace them and to help them through it. And if someone was in a really bad spot and someone said, go ahead and jump, think about how horrible that would make them feel. We should be seeing that it's the same thing for the person who is in a medical situation that they don't want to go through, that if we just say, oh yeah, it's going to be tough, like go for it, they're just going to feel like, well, no one's even cares about my life. No one's going to want to help me through this. So we need to be the ones who are voicing that they have so much to live for, that we are there for them. Anyone in a desperate situation, I really do think that's all they really want to hear. And for a doctor to use what they know and their, you know, their medical power to manipulate someone into thinking that they need to die to get out of their situation, it's just so sad. So we need really good doctors, and we need people standing up for these people in these crises, you know. It makes me just want to go be a nurse and make sure this stuff doesn't happen. But so I hope that watching that video would inspire you to make sure that when you're talking to someone who's just saying, you know, if you ever do get in these discussions about assisted suicide and why it's wrong, it's obviously just wrong on a human level, because we're supposed to be building each other up and helping people live wonderful lives and support each other. And imagine if, like, what if we were all suicidal and the whole world was telling us, okay, fine, go kill yourselves? There wouldn't be any of us. So obviously it's not a common situation, but if it's becoming more and more common, more and more people are going to be dying willfully in a hospital. Like these suicides that happen on bridges, now it's going to be just all over the news that suicides are just happening with the doctor right in the room. And it's just, to me, it's just a very overwhelming and scary thought. So we need to be doing everything we can to convince people that that's not the answer. Ending your suffering isn't the answer. Just trying to find people who will support you through it, because there is light at the end of the tunnel, especially in cases with like someone who's going through cancer. You never know, like miracles happen every day, and they really might get through that. So it's important to show people that. And these are more apologetics resources about these things. And then, like I said, that book that I put in the chat by Stephanie Gray, she wrote that book. It's her most recent. She has two, but the assisted suicide one, I think it just came out. So I would love to do a book club on that one eventually, but I'm sure it's very clear and goes even more in depth to all the examples of why assisted suicide is wrong in every case, and there are no exceptions. Just like there are no exceptions in abortion, there are no exceptions with assisted suicide because it's someone's life at stake. It's not just, you know, it can't just be a whim or a choice. We need to be defending life no matter what at every stage, especially the people who feel like they don't have something to live for. Everyone has something to live for. And all these people, you know, they're someone's child, they're someone's spouse, they're someone's brother. We need to be seeing, really putting on a personal level the fact that every person is loved by someone. And the doctor who's telling them your life isn't worth it, think how much that would break the heart of the mother or the father, you know. So we need to, it's obviously hard to think of everyone as like our own brother or sister, but it is true that in a certain way we're supposed to have brotherly love and care for everyone. So to really be doing everything we can to show people that their life is worth something is very important. So that is the end of the of this training. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask. And then also feel free to do more research on your own if you want to go more in depth. I'm sorry this isn't a topic that I know super much about, so I know it was long-winded and sometimes unclear, but I hope that you did learn something about the argument for it and why I think it's very clear when you talk about these things that human rights issues are all very similar in the way you talk about them. That really in the end, because every life has value, it doesn't matter if it's a difficult one or an easy one, they're all worth living. For the unborn child and for the person with the terminal illness, we have to protect those people. And to say that we don't need to because it's their body, their choice, that's just kind of like discrediting what our responsibility as a society and as part of the human race. It should be a natural instinct to help each other and to protect each other. And we're just kind of like throwing that away. We have this very selfish society of, I'll just deal with me, you deal with you. But no, like we're a community. So it's really important to work on showing that we're there to support anybody who is in need, whether it be the woman in crisis or the person with a terminal illness, not knowing if they should live or die. Yes?
Hi, my name is Wendy. I'm the faculty advisor for this group, so I'm a little bit older than most of you. I am a registered nurse, and I have been an ICU nurse for 35 years. And so I have a lot of experience with this.
Wow.
And even well before it was legalized, we were being asked to push lethal doses of drugs on certain patients and stuff. I never did, of course, and there were doctors who would never do that, and then doctors who would readily do that. And I think it's the same now. I don't think all the doctors out there are pushing this, but I do know that there is an agenda. I also know, just from some interesting firsthand experience, my 96-year-old, wonderful, most wonderful man in the world, father-in-law died on January 9th of this year, so just a few weeks ago. And we had him on hospice at the end, and part of hospice now is to ask the patient if they would be interested in, and they don't call it physician-assisted suicide, which they never have, they call it death with dignity. You have to understand that they always cloak things in terminology that sounds positive and happy. So just like they don't call it abortion, they call it choice, right? So, and the reality is that I'm sure that your statistic is right about pain control, but I always say, because I worked in ICU and I'm an ICU nurse, that death is easy, that dying is hard. Dying really is hard work. It's really not. It's rarely pleasant. Those are the lucky ones that die in their sleep. But especially if you're in the hospital or you have a terminal debilitating disease and your body is dying cell by cell, it's a very difficult process. And your information on depression being probably the #1 killer is, I've never read the statistics, but I could say that I would imagine that is very true. My own father-in-law, wonderful, godly man, just when he decided he was ready to go, I mean, he didn't want us to even, and we weren't doing anything to hasten his life, hasten the ending of his life, but he was on regular medication. He's like, why am I taking this? It's prolonging my life. And I said, no, it's just making you comfortable. I promise we're not prolonging your life with this medication.
Okay.
We're ready to go. But I think that people very often, once they get to an acceptance mode, they want to go, and so, but, again, I am with everyone else in full agreement here that that's not our decision to make. As a Christian, I believe that's God's decision to make, and that timing is his and not mine to choose. And so it's a very difficult thing, and it really is. And I have seen hundreds and hundreds of deaths, 35 years in the ICU, in the CCU, which is where most deaths happen in the ER, and the second biggest one is the CCU, cardiac unit. And so hundreds and hundreds of deaths, hundreds and hundreds of CPR. I've been around. I know what that looks like, and so I understand the appeal of this if you cloak it in a positive light. And so I think one of the things that you've covered this very clearly is that that we call it what it is, and that is suicide. And so I think that sometimes just even giving the vernacular, giving the proper name is kind of, rather than making it easy for someone. And that's something like that last video, that young man was very, very compelling. And I have never dealt with that in my life, so I'm just very touched by that and very moved by that. But I think that, again, if we make things easy for people who are in distress, they will grab for it. And so I think it is something we really need to be taking seriously, and also being very aware that now in our state, because it's very unfortunately legal, that they're offering it to hospice patients. They offered it to my father-in-law. We're very, very adamantly against it. But if you think about this, maybe it wasn't even on your radar, but now it's going to be offered to you. So it's certainly something that is very, very damaging and difficult. So thank you for the presentation. It was very powerful. So good job.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think it's interesting that we don't even know, like a lot of people don't even know that it's available, and then it's the doctor who chose you. He gives you the awareness of, oh, I can just end it now. That's just crazy to me. That it's so sad that, I mean, I don't know, you can't speak for every doctor, but it does seem like it's almost what the medical people are wanting, because it will, free up a bed. It's the same with when someone is on life support and they want your organs, they'll kind of end your life quickly. It seems like that's what we're kind of becoming, a society that just wants quick and easy everything, instead of really seeing the value in accepting whatever God does bring your way. And I think it's interesting too that you talk about depression, because I do feel like it's the people who know they have someone there fighting for them that have a stronger will to live. But if no one is fighting for you, then why would you fight for yourself? Especially if your doctor isn't fighting for you. So I think it's, once again, just goes with my what I was saying about, it's when we support people that they'll choose to kind of keep going. But if no one has a support system, it will really feel like it's better to just go, So thank you so much, Wendy, for talking about that. I'm envious of your life as a registered nurse. I feel like there's so much good, and as the world gets more and more with crazy ideas, we need good people, fighting for life. So thank you for what you do.
I have a question. Well, first off, that was a great presentation. It was the first presentation I have seen on assisted suicide, and I think that was really amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah. And one of the things I really appreciated was making the parallels between abortion and physician-assisted suicide. For me, that's always been kind of hazy, but this really crystallized it. So thank you for that. You had mentioned. I think for me at least, one of the more compelling points that you made was how like just as we don't have like the right to take someone else's life, therefore we don't have the right to take our own life.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering if would it be appropriate then to consider physician assist or just any suicide whatsoever as a kind of like self-murder, or is that like an improper framing?
No,
Um,
it is self-murder, I think, which is why suicide is considered a crime. It is considered like killing someone, but you can never go on trial for it because you've died, obviously. So it's the only crime where you can't actually go to trial, but it is considered killing, even though, like, yes, it's killing yourself, but it is considered a terrible crime. And until it became possible to do it under medical terms and make it seem like it's okay, it has always been something that we do not condone as a country. So I do think, yes, it is like killing yourself is the same kind of term as self-murder. It sounds funny to say it like that, but we say you killed someone else or you killed yourself. We look at that both as unjustly taking a certain person's life. And even if it's your own life, the people who take their own lives, they're not in their right mind. I can't imagine anybody has taken their life knowingly. Just like he was saying in the video, every single person who survived it was like, what am I doing? It's just for a split second, they feel like they have nothing to live for. And the second they jump, they just instantly regret it, in the same way that, a woman who thinks she needs an abortion, as soon as it's over, she just thinks, what have I done? And that's because it's something that's wrong. It is such an unnatural thing, and it is killing something that's very precious. And just as we have a natural tendency to see the good in others, we all are in such like self-preservation mode. Love one another as you love yourself. We naturally love ourselves, and it sometimes can be harder to love other people. So when we have this automatic compassion for others, like, we should have that same compassion for ourselves, even if we can't always see the good in ourselves. So I do think you should talk about it as if killing yourself is murdering of someone, especially because when you're not in your right mind, I think you're seeing your life as somebody else's. You're not like thinking about, if I take my life right now, that's it. I think people are not in their right mind to really see what they're doing, and so they do that. But it is technically murdering themselves.
Cool, awesome, thank you for that. And if I may, so Dr. Aaron Cariotti, who was the doctor in that last video, he wrote a fantastic book which I have called The Catholic Guide to Depression. Highly recommend it. Highly recommend it.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, I think it all stems to mental illness. I think it was really interesting that they compared the psychiatrist to the physician. They're saying, just as a psychiatrist should never encourage someone in their suicidal thoughts and should really try to steer them away from that, why is it not the same for this physician? Why, if someone's really struggling with something, should every doctor should be like the one in that video who is saying, you have so much to live for, don't say that you don't, because just as we would never tell someone else, you're disabled, you shouldn't live, if something happened like that to us, we would want to have that same compassion for ourselves. I have a friend actually who just was in a skiing accident over Thanksgiving, and he's now paralyzed from the neck down, and he can just he's barely like learning how to move his arms. He's finally able to breathe on his own and talk, and it's been so hard for him. He was a very good athlete, he was very strong and had so much to live for. But we need to be showing that he still has so much to live for, and even though his life is going to look a lot different now, he brings so much good to people. Every post I see, I just get so emotional because he's being such a witness to fighting for life, even when you're in this new situation that you kind of, you can't believe you're in it, and you don't know what you're going to do each day, but you just keep fighting every single day. And what are his parents doing? They're visiting him, and people are writing him letters, and his siblings are calling him and showing him, like, they're taking the time to show him that even though his life is different, it's still just as valuable, and they love him, and they're there to help him through it. He does have bouts of depression, and he does have to go to spiritual direction to help him through all the thoughts that he has when he does get really down, but he has great days too. And I think of all the people in my life right now, he's the one that's making such an impression of overcoming adversity and being an example. I think it is the people who deal with things that we can't even imagine that end up becoming the most light to the world. And so we need to be showing people, like, yes, you might be struggling right now, but people see you and are affected by you and what you're going through. So depression is obviously a challenge, but we should be there to build people up and to show them that even when they're down, people love them and are learning from them.
Yeah, I have like a comment. I think, like, personally, I think there's something like really evil about like sort of like someone who's just received like a really bad diagnosis or is like having a really hard time in life and then try to like nudge them in a certain direction is like something like particularly like malevolent, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, like can you imagine like a recovering addict trying to get sober and then you're like, oh, well, like that's not really working. So like, here's a way back into your old lifestyle. And it's just like, wow, like that's just particularly like just, yeah, it's just terrible. But the second comment is like, I think the most powerful video was Barbara, I believe, or the lady in the second video where she's like, I want to live, but they're not giving me that option. Like here's someone who's trying to fight to live, and she isn't being given even a fighting chance, but she's given the chance to, you know, effectively kill herself, which is like, that was like really shocking to me.
Yeah, and that story of that little baby too, like the parents were doing everything they could, but because it's legal, it's like it didn't matter what the parents thought. It's just, oh, this is what everybody else thinks and this is the easiest way out, so let's just not give them support. We live in a world where a lot of like government's controlling a lot of people who are in power and have the knowledge that we think they have, they're controlling a lot, and to be able to give the power over life to someone who doesn't actually value it, like, it's a very scary thought. We should be trusting the people who actually want to help us, and to say, well, the doctor said this is what I should do, so I should. No, we should listen to the people who are fighting for our lives and not telling us to end them when things get hard. But yeah, these are all excellent points, so thank you guys for your contributions.
Awesome. Yeah, that was a great presentation. Thank you. I didn't really know anything about this topic, so that was a good introduction into it. Is there anything else anyone wants to add or any other questions? Awesome. All right. Thank you all for coming out. I'll try to upload the recording for this one too, and then I'll try to edit in the other videos so it's more streamlined when you rewatch it.
Okay. Thanks so much, guys, and sorry about the YouTube difficulties, but I'm glad we got through it.
Thank you, Jordan.
Thank you. God bless you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That was really good.